In the cold, broken silence of an ancient world, a small team of alien researchers stood at the mouth of a ruined temple. Thick gray clouds covered the sky, and the air tasted like metal. The leader of the team, a young alien named Kiran, stared at the huge, cracked doors in front of him. Strange symbols covered the stone, glowing softly with a warning only the oldest of their people could still read. "Are you sure about this?" asked Mira, his second in command, her long green tendrils shaking slightly. This place was sealed for a reason. Kiran smiled, but there was nervousness in his eyes. "That's why we must go inside, to find out what they were so afraid of." The others hesitated, but they trusted Chiron. Carefully, they pushed the heavy doors open. A deep groaning sound echoed across the empty valley as the doors gave way, revealing a dark passage that seemed to swallow all light. For a moment, none of them moved. The air inside was colder, thicker, as if it was warning them one last time. Step by step, they entered. Inside, ancient walls rose high above them, covered in pictures and writing that none of their translators could fully understand. Strange murals showed tall, two-legged creatures with bright eyes, creatures that looked oddly like the ancient descriptions of humans. But there was something terrifying in the way they were drawn, massive, powerful, surrounded by fire and destruction. After an hour of searching, Kieran found a hidden chamber behind a fallen pillar. It was sealed with a crystal lock. On the lock, the message was clear, even in the ancient tongue: "Never wake them." Kieran's heart pounded. Sweat ran down his forehead despite the cold. He knew he should turn back. He knew he should call for the others. But curiosity burned stronger than fear. Using a small tool, he cracked the crystal lock. The door slid open with a whisper, revealing a small stone pedestal. On it sat a single object, a glowing stone, no larger than his fist. Strange lights moved inside it, like tiny stars trapped under glass. Chiron reached out and touched it. Once visions flooded his mind. Flashes of worlds burning, starships falling, giant creatures roaring into battle, and above all, the endless golden eyes of the humans, watching, waiting. A deep voice echoed in his mind. "Let them sleep. For your own good." Kieran fell back, gasping. His crewmates ran in, shouting his name, but he couldn't answer. His mind was filled with the terrible images. "What happened?" Mira asked, kneeling beside him. Kieran opened his eyes. He looked at the glowing stone in his hand. He couldn't explain it, but he felt something had already changed, something far away had noticed him. "We have to leave," he whispered. "Now." The crew didn't ask questions. They helped him up and ran back through the dark halls. As they moved, the temple around them began to tremble, dust falling from the ceiling. The murals on the walls seemed to glow brighter, the drawn humans almost alive, almost moving. They reached the ship and blasted off the surface just as the temple collapsed into itself, sending a cloud of dust high into the sky. The old world returned to silence. But in the cold vacuum of space, the real danger had only just begun. Back aboard the ship, Mira tended to Chiron while the pilot set course back home. But the systems were acting strangely. The navigation, lights flickered, the engines rumbled harder than they should, and in the corner of the ship's control panel, a small symbol appeared, a golden eye, staring, blinking once, then disappearing. Chiron sat silently in the infirmary, the glowing stone beside him. He couldn't stop thinking about what he had seen. Why would the ancient races powerful enough to shape galaxies all leave behind the same simple, terrified warning about one planet? He clenched his fists. He needed answers. He needed to understand. And in his heart, he knew the journey to Earth had already begun. In the cold, dark space beyond the ship, far away across the stars, a sleeping world stirred. Deep under oceans, beneath mountains and hidden cities, and ancient humans locked away in forgotten slumber, twitched in their deep sleep. Something had touched them. Something had called. And soon, they would wake. The ship floated through the cold darkness of space, silent except for the low hum of engines struggling to hold course. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Kieran sat alone in the ship's archive room, the glowing stone resting carefully on the table before him. His eyes were tired but focused, scanning every line of ancient text he had pulled from the temple's surviving records. Every document, every whisper from the past, carried the same dreadful message. Never wake the humans. Never disturb Earth, but why? The warning spoke of things too strange to believe, of wars that ended entire star systems, of creatures who fought against the laws of nature itself, of beings that made gods look like insects. Mira entered the room quietly, carrying a cup of steaming green liquid. She placed it beside Kieran and glanced at the glowing stone, uneasy. "You should rest," she said softly. "The stone? It's affecting you." Kieran shook his head. "I need to know more," he replied. "We're already part of this now. If we don't understand it, we won't survive it." Before Mira could answer, the ship's lights flickered. A strange beeping noise echoed through the halls. Both of them stood up sharply as the emergency alarm activated. They rushed to the command deck where the rest of the crew were already gathered, their faces pale with fear. The main view screen showed something unbelievable. A massive, dark shape was moving toward them from the void, silent, shapeless, but somehow alive. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't an asteroid. It was something older. The ship's AI struggled to analyze it. Unknown entity. Composition. Unreadable. Warning. Avoid contact. Panic spread through the crew. "What is that?" someone cried out. "A black hole?" "No," Kieran whispered, feeling the stone in his pocket grow warmer. "It's a sentinel. A protector. A warden. Something left behind to make sure no one ever disturbed Earth." As the dark mass came closer, the ship's engines failed. They were trapped, drifting helplessly toward it. The crew screamed and scrambled for escape pods, but Kieran stayed rooted, in place, staring at the screens. Then, without warning, the stone in his pocket flashed with blinding light. The ship jerked violently. A tunnel of golden energy formed ahead, pulling the ship forward. Within seconds, they were hurled through hyperspace and faster than they had ever traveled before. The crew collapsed, dizzy and breathless. Systems flickered back online. The black mass was gone, left far behind. But their new location made every heart freeze in terror. On the screen before them, hanging huge and blue and green against the black of space, was Earth. They had been brought straight to the forbidden world. Kieran stood slowly, feeling a heavy pressure in his chest. The planet looked beautiful, peaceful, oceans shining under soft clouds, green forests covering most of the continents. There were no cities, no spaceports, no signals, just silence. The ship's sensors buzzed, trying to lock onto something. Suddenly, a faint signal broke through, a very, very old satellite orbiting Earth. It sent only one message, repeating over and over in a broken, desperate voice. "Turn back. Turn back. Turn back." The crew looked at each other, faces pale and trembling. But it was too late. Something had seen them. Kieran turned to the others, his voice calm but firm. "Prepare for descent." Mira grabbed his arm. "Are you insane? Didn't you hear the warnings?" Kieran's eyes burned with a strange, reckless fire. "We are already caught. We need to find the truth, before the truth finds us." As the ship entered Earth's orbit, the last thing they noticed was that the clouds over the largest continent were swirling, as if something beneath them had begun to stir. Something ancient, something angry, something human. The ship shuddered as it entered Earth's atmosphere. Flames licked the edges of the hull and the crew clung tightly to their seats. Alarms blared, but no one dared speak. Their eyes were fixed on the view through the front screen. A world, both breathtaking and terrifying. From above, Earth looked like a painting. Endless green forests, towering mountains wrapped in white mist, and deep blue oceans stretching beyond the horizon. But something was wrong. Terribly wrong. No lights, No cities, no signs of life as they understood it, just vast untouched wilderness, as if civilization had never existed, or had been erased by time itself. "Where are the humans?" whispered Mira, her voice shaking. Kiran didn't answer. He was staring at a strange formation below. A perfect circle burned into a jungle, as if something had once landed there and left a permanent scar. It was ancient, overgrown, but still visible from high above. "We're going down there," Chiron ordered. The ship landed with a heavy thud on the edge of the clearing. Steam hissed from the engines as the landing gear struggled to find solid ground in the thick, mossy soil. The air outside was heavy, rich with the scent of old rain and strange flowers. Yet underneath it all was something sour, the smell of something ancient and wrong. As the crew stepped onto the surface, the silence hit them like a wall. No birds, no insects, no wind. Just the heavy, waiting silence of a planet that should have been full of life but wasn't. Mira scanned the area with a handheld device. No life signs, no transmissions, no energy fields. It's like Earth itself is asleep. Chiron moved forward, his boots sinking slightly into the damp ground. At the center of the clearing stood something unexpected. A towering stone, monolith covered in vines and moss. Strange symbols were carved into its surface, worn down by time. As he brushed away the moss, he revealed the same message he had seen in the ancient temple. Let them sleep. But there was something new, too. A map. A path leading deep into the jungle. Without hesitation, Kiran motioned for the others to follow. They moved carefully through the dense, twisted trees. Every step felt heavier, as if the planet itself wanted to hold them back. Strange shapes loomed in the mist, fallen structures, old machines half buried in roots, and statues of warriors with their heads bowed low, their weapons pointing down. "Are these statues?" asked one of the crew. Kiran knelt beside one and placed his hand against its cold surface. His heart skipped a beat. It wasn't a statue. It was a soldier, a real being, frozen perfectly in place, encased in some kind of crystallized stasis. His armor was like nothing Kiran had ever seen, sleek, powerful, alive. And there were hundreds of them. Rows and rows of human soldiers, sleeping in silence, their faces calm but ready, as if waiting for a battle cry that would never come. Suddenly a sound echoed through the jungle, a low, deep hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The ground beneath their feet vibrated softly. Mira grabbed Kiran's arm, her voice trembling. "We have to go. We are not supposed to be here." Before Kiran could answer, the soldier closest to him twitched, only a tiny movement. A flicker of the eyes, a tightening of the fingers on the weapon, but enough to freeze the entire crew in fear. The humming grew louder. The trees themselves seemed to shiver. Somewhere in the distance, a light blinked red through the mist. Once, twice, 3 times, a signal, an awakening. Chiron pulled himself together. "Back to the ship," he ordered, voice hard. "Now." They ran. Behind them, the air crackled with unseen energy. The jungle, so still before, now seemed to watch them. Every leaf, every shadow, every breath of mist whispering the same terrible truth. The humans were not dead. They were sleeping, and someone had just started to wake them. As the crew reached the ship and launched back into the skies, Kiran looked back one last time. He saw the jungle shifting, the old monolith glowing faintly. He didn't know how much time they had, but deep in his bones he understood. They had crossed a line that should never have been crossed, and now Earth was no longer sleeping quietly. The ship climbed higher into the thick gray clouds, leaving the cursed jungle behind. But even inside the ship, the crew could feel it. A presence, like invisible fingers brushing against their minds. The ship's walls creaked as if the very air was heavy with unseen voices. Kiran sat in the command chair, gripping the sides tightly. His heart pounded, not from the flight, but from something he could not explain. Something had followed them. Mira was at the scanner station, staring at the screen. "There's something wrong," she whispered. The readings made no sense. Phantom signals, old broadcasts from thousands of years ago, overlapping each other. Strange words in forgotten tongues whispered through the ship's speakers, too soft to understand but sharp enough to chill the blood. Suddenly, the ship's lights flickered. Then the speakers crackled, and a single broken message came through. "Why? Have you come?" The voice was ancient, hollow, like wind blowing across the graves of fallen empires. The crew looked at each other, frozen. Nobody had touched the communication systems. No one had opened a channel. The message had come from the planet itself. Chiron forced himself to speak. "Trace the source." Mira's hands trembled over the controls. It's not coming from the ground," she said. "It's coming from inside our ship." The silence that followed was worse than the message. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, as if the air itself was waiting for something. Chiron stood slowly. "We need to find it, now." They split into teams, moving cautiously through the narrow corridors of the ship. Flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing only metal walls and trembling shadows. But as they passed the cargo hold, they heard it again, a low, rhythmic thumping sound like a heartbeat. Chiron and Mira pushed open the door. There, at the center of the room, the glowing stone lay on the floor. It pulsed with light, brighter than ever before, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. But it wasn't alone. Floating above it were echoes, shimmering shapes barely visible, like reflections in broken glass. They moved slowly, turning toward the crew, faces blurry but filled with terrible sadness. One of them spoke, its voice a whisper in every language at once. "You were warned. Let them sleep." The shapes swirled around the stone, touching the metal of the ship. Wherever they touched, the surface blackened and cracked as if rotting from inside. Mira stepped back, panic in her eyes. "We have to get rid of it. We have to destroy the stone." Chiron hesitated. His mind raced. The stone had brought them here, but it had also saved them from the dark mass in space. It was dangerous, but maybe it was also a key. Before he could decide, the ship shook violently. Alarm screamed. The echoes vanished, sucked back into the stone like smoke in the wind. Mira screamed from the scanner console. "Something is rising from the surface. Massive energy readings." Chiron rushed to the window. Through the clouds below, he saw it. Something moving. Huge structures, hidden for eons, were rising from beneath the forests and mountains. Great towers of black metal glowing faintly, twisting upward toward the sky like reaching hands. Earth was no longer quiet, and deep beneath those towers, something even more powerful was awakening. Something that remembered every insult, every attack, every empire that had once dared to challenge humanity. Chiron turned back to his crew. "We leave now," he said, voice sharp, "before they fully wake." But even as he spoke, he knew the truth in his heart. It was already too late. They had been seen, and they would never escape unnoticed. The ship shook under their feet as it struggled against the strange forces rising from Earth. Warning lights flashed red. Alarms screamed without mercy. Chiron grabbed the controls, fighting to stabilize their course. But something was pulling them back, something old, powerful, and angry. "We're losing altitude," Mira shouted over the noise. "It's like the planet itself won't let us leave." Chiron's mind raced. If they stayed in the sky, they would crash. If they landed, they would fall into the heart of the storm, straight into the unknown. There was no choice. "Prepare for emergency landing," he ordered. The ship groaned as it descended rapidly, punching through the thick storm clouds. Lighting cracked around them, illuminating glimpses of the ground. Massive ruins, broken monuments, and deep pits like open mouths yawning in the earth. They landed hard, the ship skidding across an overgrown stone plaza before finally stopping, smoke pouring from the engines. For a moment there was only silence, broken only by the soft hissing of damaged systems. Then they heard it, a low, deep chanting sound, coming from the earth itself, like 1,000 invisible voices calling from beneath the ground. Chiron stood, heart hammering in his chest. He knew where he had to go. "The center," he whispered. "It's calling us to the center." Without waiting for debate, he grabbed a scanner and stepped out into the heavy, damp air. The others followed reluctantly, weapons ready. They crossed the ancient plaza, their boots echoing on cracked stones. Around them, statues of warriors lined the path, not broken but standing proud, as if frozen mid-salute. Moss and vines crawled over their bodies, but their eyes, strangely, remained clean, sharp and almost watchful. At the heart of the plaza stood a massive doorway, half buried by time and nature. Strange symbols glowed faintly on its surface, symbols Chiron recognized from the temple ruins. Mira stepped beside him, whispering, This is a tomb." Chiron shook his head, staring at the door. "No, it's not a tomb. It's a lock." The stone in his pocket pulsed again, brighter than ever before. He stepped forward, ignoring the fear in Mira's voice as she pleaded for him to stop. Chiron placed the stone into a circular socket at the center of the door. For a second, nothing happened. Then, with a deep grinding sound that seemed to shake the bones of the world itself, the door slowly opened. Inside was a vast chamber, larger than any hall he had ever seen. A single platform stood at its center, and upon it, a crystal coffin, and inside the coffin was a human. He was unlike anything Chiron had imagined. Tall, broad, with silver markings along his skin, wearing armor that shimmered with hidden energy. His hands were crossed over his chest and his face was calm, but the air around him pulsed with power so thick it was hard to breathe. The crew entered slowly, overwhelmed by the sight. Suddenly, the air temperature dropped sharply. Frost crawled up the walls. Their breath misted in front of them. The coffin began to crack. Tiny spiderweb lines appeared across its surface, glowing with fierce white light. Mira grabbed Chiron's arm in terror. "We have to run. We have to leave before too late." With a deafening shatter, the crystal coffin exploded outward, sending shards flying like a silent scream. The force knocked everyone to the ground. The human stood up. He opened his golden eyes filled with ancient memories, old wars, and a hunger for freedom. For a long moment, he simply looked at them. Then he smiled. Not a warm smile. Not a kind smile. A smile that spoke of promises made long ago. Promises of vengeance. Promises of reclaiming what was lost. The human's voice echoed through the hall, deeper than thunder. "Who dares wake the sons of Earth?" Behind him, the air rippled. Across the land, the ancient soldiers frozen in crystal began to stir, one by one. Across the jungles, the oceans, the mountains, the sleeping army of humanity awoke. And the universe would soon remember why Earth had been named a death world. Chiron stumbled backward, heart hammering, mind screaming. He had broken the seal, and now nothing could stop what was coming. The ground shook beneath their feet. The rumbling wasn't from the ship or the engines, it was deeper, coming from the heart of the planet itself. Chiron struggled to stand as the vibrations grew stronger, making the very air hum against his skin. Across the vast ruined plaza, the crystal-coated soldiers, the ones they had mistaken for statues, were beginning to move. First, a single hand twitched. Then another flexed fingers that had been stiff for thousands of years. A moment later, hundreds of golden eyes opened at once, piercing through the mist. Mira screamed. The rest of the crew froze, unable to believe what they were seeing. The human, standing before them, the one they had accidentally awakened, slowly turned his head toward the noise. His expression was calm, almost peaceful, but his golden eyes burned with a power beyond anything they had ever encountered. He raised, a hand high into the air. A deep ancient command rolled through the ruins, not spoken with words but felt in the bones. "Rise, children of Earth." At once, the stasis around the soldiers shattered like glass underfoot. Warriors stepped free from their crystal prisons, armor gleaming as ancient weaponry rebooted in their hands. Strange machines, once hidden beneath vines and soil, unfolded. With metallic shrieks, tanks, walkers, and flying drones each sparking to life like beasts answering a call. Chiron and his team backed away slowly, their minds numb with terror. "Run," Mira whispered. "We have to get out of here. Now." Chiron didn't argue. They turned and sprinted toward their ship, the ground trembling under the heavy march of awakening soldiers. Overhead, black shapes filled the sky. Ancient human warships lifting off from hidden bunkers, their engines roaring like dragons. As they reached the ship, Chiron glanced back. The human leader, still standing at the broken crystal platform, watched them without moving. He wasn't chasing them, he wasn't afraid, he was letting them go. A warning. As the ship lifted into the air, the view from above revealed the full horror. Earth's surface, once quiet and still, now boiled with movement. Armies formed, massive columns of armored figures marching across lands that had been silent for millennia. The sleeping giants had not just awoken, they had remembered everything. The ship's communication system crackled once again. The same ancient voice spoke, but now it was clear, heavy with unstoppable certainty. "You have woken the blood of Earth. You have disturbed what should never rise again. Flee, and tell the stars. Humanity is awake." Chiron stared at the screen, his hands trembling. He realized now why all those ancient warnings had been so desperate, why entire civilizations had written the same message again and again. Never. Wake. The humans. As they fled toward space, Earth's sky changed. Dozens of warships, sleek and black, with golden insignias broke through the cloud layers. They formed a wall in orbit, engines burning with old fury. Signals, strong and fierce, blasted through space. Not begging for peace, not asking for alliance. A declaration of return. Across the galaxy, in far-off councils and hidden empires, alarms rang out. Ancient races who had once ruled without fear now trembled. The legends they had laughed at, the old warnings they had buried had come true. Earth was no longer silent. Humanity, the Deathworlders, had returned, and nothing would ever be the same again. The ship tore through space, engines burning at their limit as Chiron and his crew fled the nightmare they had unleashed. Behind them, Earth grew smaller, but not quieter. From the blackness around Earth, massive human warships now floated, silent, cold, and waiting. They were not chasing, not attacking. They were watching. It was not a hunt. It was a warning. Chiron sat frozen at the helm, staring back at the distant blue planet. His mind replayed everything: the ancient ruins, the frozen soldiers, the golden-eyed. Human who had smiled not with kindness but with terrible patience. They had not awoken monsters. They had awoken kings. Across the galaxy, the reaction was immediate. At the distant edges of explored space, the powerful empires, the Zorvanti Dominion, the Qatari High Clans, even the Vrosian Technomarch, received the same signal at the same moment, a simple, brutal broadcast, sent from Earth in a language older than any living race. We remember. In gleaming citadels and shadowy council chambers, ancient leaders dropped their glasses, their meetings forgotten. Generals called emergency sessions. Admirals ordered fleets to mobilize. Prophets fell to their knees, wailing that the old nightmares had returned. For centuries they had hidden the truth from their own people, that once, long ago, the humans had risen to challenge them all. And nearly won. That it had taken the combined force of 100 civilizations to drive them into sleep. Now, every civilization across the stars trembled with a terrible, bitter truth. They had not destroyed humanity. They had only delayed them, and now time had run out. On Earth, the human armies marched through their ruined cities, gathering in great numbers. The skies above them thundered with the rise of ancient starships, their black hulls shining with renewed power. Factories long buried under jungles roared back to life, pouring out machines of war built from blueprints older than memory. But it wasn't just the power that terrified the galaxy. It was the calm. The humans weren't rushing into war. They were preparing carefully, methodically, like apex predators who knew no real fear. Back on the fleeing ship, Mira broke the silence. "We have to warn them," she whispered. "We have to tell everyone what's coming." Kieran nodded, his face pale. "Yes. But no one will believe us until it's too late." He sent the message anyway, broadcasting the truth to every known channel across the galaxy. "Earth is awake. Humanity has returned. Prepare yourselves, or run." The ship pushed deeper into space, leaving the system behind. But even light years away, Kieran knew they would never truly escape what they had done. In their greed, their curiosity, their arrogance, they had broken the oldest law written into the bones of the galaxy. Let them sleep. And now, the Deathworlders would reclaim the stars. Not with mercy, not with forgiveness, but with a fire that no empire could survive. The galaxy would remember this day forever, the day the silent Earth opened its eyes and smiled.